the Eisenhower house that they live in, they're going to talk about, was actually the second piece of land the Eisenhowers owned. And I was going to give you a little history about how the Eisenhowers came into Lower Paxton Township. Now this first plot was Peter Eisenhower, and his father came across from Germany, and they were in Berks County and Lebanon County, down near Bethel, and they had their first farm there. Peter, not being the oldest, moved to Lower Paxton Township. He came in here about 1759, and he was on the hill until about 1799. Now where this is 9 and A, where the Eisenhower property, and it's approximately where Forest Hills is. Next to it is the David Patton property. We've all heard of Patton's Fort. We've seen the sign on Lingelstown Road, and his farm was next to the Eisenhower farm. The Eisenhowers were up on the hill, and he transferred in 1799, he transferred that farm to his son Peter. Now Peter would have been, I should say, the first Peter was the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Ike Eisenhower. Then his son Peter, which was up on the same land, okay, off Lingelstown Road, had a son Frederick. Now Frederick was the second Frederick in Peter's family. The first one was killed in the Revolutionary War, and this boy was born, he was about 7 years old when his father Peter died. And so his inheritance to the farm was not as much as the inheritance that the rest of the family got. He only got about $200. But he married a Miller. Now the Miller farm, he married Barbara Miller, and her father gave Frederick about 80 acres. And that farmland is where in about 1820 they built the brick house that you're going to hear about. Now this is off of Union Deposit Road. It's been there since about 1820. John Miller, who deeded the 53 acres to Frederick Eisenhower in 1820, Frederick and Barbara moved to Likens Valley in 1830. Now they left the brick house when they moved, but later his son Jacob, whose middle name is Frederick, who was the grandfather to Ike Eisenhower, moved back there for a short time. When they moved out of the farm, Jacob moved back to Likens Valley, and then shortly thereafter, all of the Eisenhower family collected in wagons and headed to Kansas. Now, I think, Pam, was there 15 wagons? 17?
15
Yep.
carloads.
15 carloads that went in the wagons to head out. And what they say in the article, which I was talking to Bill about this earlier this week, they say in the article that tells about them moving to Kansas back in the late 1800s, they took $500,000 with them. Now this was all of the Eisenhowers, but back then that was a lot of money. It's almost unbelievable because it would be in the, it would be about, I think, $10 million today, if not more. David Eisenhower, who was Ike's father, was born out in Likens. It seemed that the Eisenhowers moved back and forth between the Miller property and the Eisenhower property. Now this plot map on the side shows where Timothy Shaw sold the land to John Miller. And the Eisenhowers got part of that John Miller land. And now, of course, there's a very small part of it left that the Pam's house is on. But you can get an idea how big this field was. just to put it a little bit easier to understand, Nicholas Eisenhower was the first Eisenhower to arrive in Philadelphia, later lived in Lebanon County. His son, Peter Eisenhower, was the first to come to Lower Paxton Township and lived up off Lingelstown Road. The next one down was Frederick, who, because he moved over and married into the Miller family, lived off of Union Deposit until they moved to Lycans Valley. The next one down was Jacob Frederick, which would have been the grandfather of Ike. The next one was David Eisenhower, whose middle name was Jacob. You can really get confused with these names. He was, of course, Ike's father. Now, Ike was born in Kansas, but all of the rest of the relatives were born in Pennsylvania, with the exception of Nicholas. And the older Peter, excuse me, I think he came over with Nicholas. Now have I got you totally confused? Now, from the map that we have, we can figure out approximately where the original Eisenhower farm was off Lingelstown Road. And I know Bob has interest because there was a foundation you thought that was up there.
I've heard stories, but I don't know.
Well, we have a way now of taking the markings off this map and getting the GPS so that we can get a close look and see if we can find that exact land. So I think that would be a great project for us going forward. We know where the Eisenhowers off Union Deposit lived. We'd like to find out the exact location of the Eisenhowers off Lingelstown Road. And now it's Pam's turn. Rick, I didn't tell them.
Okay, well, they will see that later.
Okay.
That's an autograph that's in our entrance hall. One of the people that lived in the house, that they carved their names and initials in our wall, and you'll see that later. In the early 80s, Paul and I, we had 2 girls, had another one on the way. We were living in Paxton, and we decided, let's get a bigger house, maybe some land. So I said, I gave my husband the chore of going out and looking for a farmhouse, or an old house, farmhouse preferably. And he looked at many, and I never saw them. He already knew they were off. But he found this one out on Union Deposit Road, and he took me to see it. After he took some of his friends from business, they went and checked it out to see it, because it needed a lot of work, and you're going to see that. The Biddings had it when we, before us, they had a turkey farm there, and Helene was very active in Fort Hunter, and she loved antiques and history, and she did a lot of the research. So I already knew when we moved in the history of the house looked like before we moved in. So we had a lot of work to do. The outside was pretty bad, but Paul took around some of his clients who were in construction, and they said, oh yeah, you can fix that, you can fix that. So we weren't too worried about that. We knew it would be, we'd do things in waves, do one thing at a time, and it would take time. So anyway.
Is that the front of the house?
That's the front of the,
So there was
this,
a door at one time?
this is Union Deposit Road, and there were originally 2 doors out front. And then Biddings removed the 2 doors, and you're gonna see as I go around the side that we enter on the side. But this is along Union Deposit Road. Okay, that's what it looks like today. Okay, so we did a lot of work. But we still have the steps from Union Deposit Road that would have led up to the doors in the front. So that's what it looks like today, but let me go into here. So after we moved in, we ripped out a lot of the landscaping and started with that. A lot of painting had to be done. There was rotted wood, many places that needed replaced. We worked on that. And then one of Paul's clients, I don't know the name, Gary Hauk. Anybody know Gary? Well, Paul called him up and said, hey, Gary, come back to our house and do a little spot test, you know, where nobody's going to see it. We'll probably have it done. So Paul was in California, and he calls home and said, honey, Gary was here and did the spot test. You can see it from the road, because he did it right out front here. And when Paul talked to Gary, Gary says, oh, well, you were going to do it anyway. Yeah, we were, but that kind of moved it up on the list, because you could see when he would clean it, it looked like a new house. Everything matched. Originally, it was the summer kitchen and then the house, and then the door was moved from the front where it was off the road and put here, so you'd enter the house over on this side. Right there are all the old windows, and we eventually replaced those. They weren't on ropes or chains. You had sticks to hold them up if you could open them. And they were really old. There were a lot of pines. So there was a film on them. They were not clear. It was just easier, and we talked about it. Of course, much more energy efficient to just replace them. So we replaced those windows with Pella architectural series that resembled them the most, and it made a world of difference. So here.
Pam, quick question. On a chimney stack up at the top, the beam.
For
Did the
bidding.
biddings have that? They
Yes,
put that in there?
yes.
Okay, I was curious.
Okay, so you can see after the house, now this is today, but you can see the difference it made after it's cleaned. So it was totally repointed and cleaned.
That's beautiful.
What's the little house behind there?
Well, that's a smokehouse. Yeah, I'll show you later then. Mhm. Okay, so we did a lot of things before we hit our major renovations. We had to upgrade the electrical, wiring, the brickwork, windows, replaced all the window sashes. A lot of those were rotted. But anyway, so one day after all the college tuition was done, it was time to do the kitchen. So I was doing research. I worked in a bookstore, and I came across this book, and it had inside a company, Restore More, that was featured on this in the book, and they're in Mannheim. So I looked them up on the website, and I said to Paul, why don't we call them and see if they'll do it, because this guy specializes in older houses and historical buildings. So Gary came up, and we started our plan to do, I desperately needed a new kitchen. The kitchen was from the 50s. I didn't desperately, but I wanted one. A white kitchen, and we needed to add a bathroom downstairs. We only had one bathroom. We made it through all that time with one bathroom and 3 girls, but now we could do another bathroom. We wanted to move the washer and dryer upstairs and put a breakfast room on. So it was quite a lot of work, and we did it in 2 different phases, because we needed to, the main part of the house was air conditioned at this time. We put an air handler up on the 3rd floor, and then ran the ductwork down through the closets to the 1st floor. So the main house was air conditioned, but the summer kitchen wasn't. So adding on the new breakfast room, we could get in the air conditioning and also get radiant heat out there. So anyway, this is an article by Restore More, and Gary Bear was the general contractor, and he was the one that hooked us up with Jim Schutte, who did the shrunks. I'll show you those later, in the entrance hall and our kitchen. That's just an old sketch of the house. So this is when you walk into the house. This is our entrance hall. And one side is the main house, the other side is the summer kitchen. So Jim Schutte is in Ephrata, and he's a cabinet maker, and he built the shrunks. Old farmhouses don't have closets, so you build them in. So I was able to have him build a closet on one side. Actually, it was 2 closets, but when we put the breakfast room on and put the air conditioning in, we needed a place for the air handler. So the air handler is on the other side, on the left, in that shrunk. So that took care of that. There's a window, but I use that to display things over. That's the original summer kitchen window. And then over on this wall, if you remember that picture that said C. Crook, a lot of the people that lived in the house would take and carve their initials on the brick wall over here by the piano. So we have a few autographs over there. Okay. And this is just an old lock that is on the front door. And this door over here, we've had many people that know about woodwork and old doors, and they say that's a beautiful door, and we've had people offer to buy it. I don't know what's so special about it, but it's got a different pattern on the back side of it. I'm sure it's original to the house. And then this is a door in our summer kitchen. And this is a summer kitchen hearth and a door into the summer kitchen. Through the door over on the right is a trap door that takes you down to the basement, which has no steps. But what happened, the reason that ladder's there is in August, with all the rain, the sump pump down there didn't work, it failed, and we had like 12 inches of water in there, but Paul got down there and you eventually went down. We didn't need it pumped, but this is the foundation of the hearth in the summer kitchen. And that ladder's our way down to it, or the step stool, sorry. The loft of the summer kitchen, the gal we bought it from, Valerie Bidding, called it the grandmother's room. I think hired help could have even stayed in that part of the house, or if somebody's sick, it's a warmer part in winter because of the hearth down below. Over on the side here, and it doesn't show in the picture, is the chain for the bell that works. My neighbors know that every time my grandchildren come to town. Yeah, so that's still working bell. Okay, and this is our living room. As you go in, we redid the floors. We went to Sylvan Brandt, and we picked out some reclaimed wood in 9, 11, and 13 inches of hard pine, and had that done in the living room, dining room, and summer kitchen. Upstairs, our floors were good enough that we could just have them sanded down and refinished. That's just the mantle. That's original wood that Mr. Bidding put in there.
So that's the same fireplace you saw in the earlier picture with Mrs. Bidding?
Yes.
But all the wallpaper was, there were 5 or 6 layers of wallpaper that we removed, and it was replastered, and then we covered the brick fireplace with some stucco and built cabinets
Right.
beside it.
And I'm decorating for Christmas there. That's not normally there.
A lot of Santas on that.
Yeah. He's the one. He's the painter and sander. This is the dining room. Of course, there's the hard pine floor. And then one of the last things that we did, the phase 2 of that major renovation, was the kitchen. It was a really old kitchen and dingy. The kids grew up eating on church pews. We had 2 church pews and a farm table, so we went a different direction. And I wanted to not look at the appliances as much. Originally they had wall ovens and stuff, and I said, no, let's switch those and put them under the oven. So everything is pretty much integrated, that you don't see the dishwasher there. Of course, you see the refrigerator and stuff, but it's pretty much all built in. And I tried to tie all the colors together. Yeah, and then out in the breakfast room, it was a Wedgwood blue, and I used that up top there. And the walls are the same as out in the dining room. And the cabinets themselves, the Jim built for us, Jim Chuddy, I had him use our same woodwork paint so that anytime there's scratches or whatever, all I have to do is sand it down and paint it with plain old regular paint, and it looks like new, even though it's getting up there like, I don't know. Anyway, Jim also built that cupboard, that hutch, and we went down to his barn in Ephrata, and he bought a walnut tree that went down, and he said, come on down and you can pick out the pieces with the graining on that you want on the front and the side. And he painted it with milk paint inside, and he did all the, you can't see it in that picture, but it's punch cut at the top. He just did really nice work, and he built a bucket bench, which is off to the side that you can't see. And then this is the breakfast room. It was an old mud room that we pushed out, and we were able to air condition that, and then that has radiant heat in the flooring too. And this is just some upstairs bedroom. You can see these floors were just refinished, they weren't replaced. And we have nice deep sills because we have 3 layers of brick and then it's plaster, so they're pretty thick walls. Another bedroom. And it's hard to tell on here, but in each bedroom, closets are built in the corner because they weren't there in the first place. So, and this is our 3rd floor. It's let's see. So Mrs. Bidding, when Eisenhower was in office, he wrote her a letter. He found out she was restoring the house, and he wrote her a letter, and he mentions her, she must have sent pictures, restoring the flooring in the attic and stuff. So we tried to get that letter from her, but she wanted to keep it. And then on the walls, one of the barns they took down, they used the barn siding for the walls. This is actually a closet over here that's built in. And then this is the smokehouse. It's not an outhouse, it's a smokehouse out in the back. And the last part of the project, the bigger project, we did was some hardscaping, and we wanted to keep that there and just incorporate it. So that just, we look out our breakfast room and we have this patio, and at the top of it we have our smokehouse. So that's where we are today. Last year we actually painted the house and we put PVC around the framing because we would like to get...
The window framing.
Yeah, the window framing. We'd like to get shutters, and if that'll, functional shutters. So by the time you put the hardware on and stuff, that will be a little more stable instead of just putting it in the wood with that extra PVC around the frame. And I do have some of the original shutter dogs that I found as I've been working out in the garden that dropped off. So I do have an idea of what we'll do there, but that's probably our next thing that we're working on. But it's kind of like a never-ending story.
And you said you tried to get a copy of that letter from Mrs. Bidding, or the letter from her. Why didn't you have her make a copy of it? So at least you have that.
Well, unfortunately, the two numbers that I had from the white pages, one was disconnected, and one, somebody answered and said, there's nobody here by that name. So I'm gonna try and actually write, they might have thought I was selling something, if they saw, an
So
unfamiliar
when we
name.
bought the house 36 years ago, a lot of that antique collecting Mrs. Bidding had done, and Pam might know a little bit about antique collecting. I wouldn't know an antique from anything.
Right.
So what we did was we went around the house and made a list of all the things in the summer kitchen, in the loft.
Right.
There's a rope bed. If you guys have seen those,
Oh,
the
yeah.
little knob to the left, it's rope suspension. So I said to Pam, pick out everything you want to buy. And she made a big list, and then I just went with a whole bunch of cash and said, I want to give you this for this, and it was like 20 items. And the last one was the Ike letter, and I said, hey, what do you want for that? And she just wouldn't, I wanted to purchase it, and if she would have given me a number, we'd probably have it. But she just didn't want to part with it. Her mother had just passed away, her father had died a couple years earlier, logging on a farm and crushed his skull with a tree, and she wanted to keep the letter.
That's
So now we try to track her down 35 years later and said, do you really want that letter now? Because we would like to have it for the
How
house.
old was she at the time?
That-
It was her
At
bidding.
the time that you bought all the furniture? How old was she?
It was from her daughter, because Mrs. Bidding had passed away,
Yes.
so we were dealing with her daughter Valerie.
And she was living in upstate New York.
But yes, I was able to get some of the, in fact, the Jenny Lynn bed that's on the third floor and the rope bed that's over in the loft, quite a few things from her. So, I mean, it made it easy. Yes,
I know it was said before, but what year was this actually built then?
around 1820.
By one of the Eisenhowers and his wife?
Frederick Eisenhower married Barbara Miller. It was her father's land, and he deeded her land.
Got it.
Right.
I just couldn't remember.
And he shows up, Frederick shows up on the census forms in Lower Paxton as a farmer and a weaver of bedspreads. And then he goes up to Elizabethville, and Jacob Frederick comes down, which is Ike's grandfather, yeah. And so,
Do you have a barn with this?
we do, it's off to the side, I don't have that in the pictures, there's a picture over there. And that was another thing that we worked on right away, because the barn, the roof was off, it was all open. To my children's delight, there was a litter of kitties in there when we moved in, and we've had them ever since. But, yeah, that we worked on the barn right away. But there are some pictures, there's a picture over there. It was in really bad shape, too.
Exactly where are you positive where this is located? Is it past Nyes Road?
Do you know where King's Crossings development is?
Yeah.
Okay, we're right in the middle. When we bought this land, developers already owned it, the land around us. You know, we have 3 acres, we would have bought more, but it was too late, so.
So it's right in the center of King's Crossing.
Across from the Free Church, Susquehanna Valley Free Church, right across the street.
There were about 78 acres that became King's Crossing, and it was owned by a couple widows in York. And a friend of mine, who's a local developer, and I kind of inquired wanting to buy it, and they didn't want to sell it. And then a few years later, John Gleis bought it and did the King's Crossing development. So we own like 3 acres in the middle of that. There's ways in and out on either side of our property.
Yes,
Do you know what the purpose of the bell was originally?
call people in from the fields, I
Okay.
guess.
There's another interesting item too, where that tree is on the right-hand side of the picture, about 30 feet in front of that, there's a hole in the ground underneath an old mulberry tree, and it was a ground cellar. So I had no idea what it was, but you could pick up the door, and there's a limestone ceiling underneath the root of this tree,
Arched.
and that's where they kept dairy items and perishables. So rather than fill it up, I had a couple guys, I put 2 new doors and structures on it over the last 20 years. It's kind of a cool thing to keep.
It just kind of got taken out in '72 with the flood. So,
The barn has a working walk-in freezer for when they did butchering. It has a big iron kettle that they used to scald chickens with. So even though growing up in Steelton, I didn't scald too many chickens, I kept all this stuff. It's nice to look at, and it's an interesting story.
Anything else? Any other?
Nicely done.
No, there's one more thing. She and her husband have one last story that really intrigued me.
Okay, I'll tell it.
Yeah. You're gonna love this one,
Well, I'm
Paul.
not telling
No, not the whole story, but tell most of it.
So, one night, my daughter Cindy was sitting out back, and she says, "Hey, Daddy, there's mice flying out of the house." And Paul looked up. It was bats coming out of the soffit. So, my husband was talking to somebody, he said, "Oh, well, in winter, they go to caves and hibernate, and then you seal it up." So, that's what Paul did. He took steel wool and molding and sealed it up. But the bats hadn't left. They were there. So they started coming in the house. Yeah. And so what were we going to do? So Paul said, "Well, I'll go up there and with the tennis." Well, first of all, he said, "I have an idea. Get your vacuum and we'll get them." Well, I had a rainbow vacuum, which puts water and so I said, "Paul, we'll drown in there, and then what if I break it? I'm going to have to go say I was sucking up bats with my vacuum." I said, "I can't do that, forget it." So he went up with his tennis racket.
It would have worked.
So he went up with his tennis racket, was swinging and stuff. He says, "I got one, scoop it up with the dustpan." So I went to scoop it and it flew up and I slammed that door. I said, "Honey, I love you, but you're on your own." So he called a friend then and they took care of it later. But I'll tell you what, it was...
So what I was explained to later by a guy that really understood him, those walls are 3 courses of brick. So they're 14 inches thick. Then there's plaster on the other side. So obviously, when they did that a couple hundred years ago, it got out perfectly solid. So all those little air pockets and places to crawl around, on the other side of the wall in the summer kitchen, the building in the back, is where they all lived. So they would fly up under the soffit, where we had holes. There might have been a 1 inch or a 1/4 inch hole. They go up in the soffit and they would live in the walls. So when the guy came out, he said, "Paul, you have hundreds of bats on the side of the wall." I said, "Well, they don't eat much and they don't get in my way." But when I came home from work one night, and she was in the entrance hall with our youngest daughter, and she was in a rocker. And I said to her, "Pam, don't panic, but on the side of the wall, about a foot from you, there's a bat hanging." So that's when I knew we actually had to do something creative to make them leave.
We also had problems with bees. Our first night, we went to hang a picture, and he jumped back, and then he did it again. And man, we had hives in the wall, so we had to get that
honeybees
taken.
on the inside wall.
Yeah, so, I mean, we had all kinds of surprises, but none lately, thank goodness.
Any other questions? Pam, I can't thank you enough. It was a fantastic